Hi, I'm Obsessing Again, and today I'm talking about my issues with the Callisto Protocol. I don't outwardly seek survival horrors, as I don't like being scared. This is ironic because The Last of Us is my favourite game of all time. However, I make exceptions if the game centres on having a story. In 2015, horror-defining director and composer John Carpenter was asked, "What makes a good horror movie?" There's a very specific secret: it should be scary. As I played this game over a weekend, I found myself not being on the edge of my seat in excitement or fear. I was on the edge of my seat from wanting to throw the controller. As the story unfolded, I was having my jaw dropped, not because of the gripping characters and dialogue, but by how mundane it was.
Whatever the hell's going on around here.
Saw something like it before.
Port and starboard sensors are both showing errors. Go check them out.
I'm going.
The setting of the Callisto Protocol is initially engaging, and the game's beginning makes you want to be the investigative journalist. Learning the basics of manoeuvring through your ship, seeing the mercenaries board, instantly puts you into the story. This fantasy of being a smuggler was like the hand side of the game I never got to experience. Josh Duhamel's Jacob Lee is an unremarkable protagonist who's wise enough to hold off oncoming enemies but provides little emotional weight or anything to root for. Whilst characters like Isaac and Dead Space, who are silent and may not be enticing, everything around the character is, both in gameplay and setting, and to forgive Dead Space 1 and the likes of Bioshock, didn't take anything away from having a mute protagonist either.
I'm done talking about it.
After crash landing and losing your right hand man, you're then being put into prison. Sam Witwer, known for roles such as Star Killer and Deacon St. John, joins the star-studded cast. His character, Captain Leon Ferris, is overly antagonistic and offers little to the story. This makes him unremarkable and feels like a last-minute addition, which is a shame. As this whirlwind for prison is being presented to you, you're then confronted with the regime of implants and a general hush-hush approach whilst you're brought to your cell. As you wake from your cell, the prison is in turmoil. You encounter Elias, who becomes your eyes and ears for your new surroundings. A fellow prisoner who's done a lot of time. Though you're unsure whether to trust him initially, you have no chance of making it out without him. With the prison's unusual practices, you're quickly shown the wonky controls of hacking zombie-like people using L2 and R2, or LTRT. The flip side to this mechanic is the dodging, and while it's a novel approach and makes it feel like you have more control, the locked-in animations can shackle you to an impending death. What could have made this mechanic better would be rewarding perfectly timed dodges. It's a simple idea, but the frustratingly claustrophobic stiffness defers people from wanting to continue to the end. During these opening hours, you spend your time moving throughout the many levels of the prison, piecing together what is happening and how to make it out alive. Elias convinces you that this is the only way you have a chance of survival, is finding a hacker who we learn is the woman you meet at the start of the game, Danny. Encountering Danny again later in the story, we find her to be equally irate from the moment she sees Jacob again.
What are you doing here?
What the hell is going on?
Did you know it was her? Is this who we're looking for?
Yeah, look, I just knew it was someone who could help us.
And
What?
why would I help you?
To the audience, it's implied Jacob's story entwines with her, but we're currently not presented with any justification.
No! Move! No, we're not infected!
Lethal force has been authorized.
Security robots are presented at the start of the game and they are terrifying. The robots are reminiscent in scope to the big daddies of Bioshock. The scale of their brute force is seen in passing them in early stealth segments, along with retro-styled croaky droid-like voices.
Scanning for movement.
Sadly, they are only seen once more, and you can spend the rest of the game not interacting with one. For a studio that is trying to create an expansive IP, they failed to lean into what could make this game great. Variations of security droids could have created suspense in better stealth segments. At this point, you can acquire upgrades and various weaponry to diversify how you kill. Though the weapons have actual credibility, the implementation isn't done practically. Once you become accustomed to certain weapons and have potentially leveled up their abilities, the game doesn't offer compelling reasons for you to switch your style of play. The GRP grip in Chapter 3 provides a way of flinging enemies into spiked walls, but it's often ineffective to comply with your actions, making it a liability. The game's linear outcome is best demonstrated in the lack of freedom to manipulate the glove and create interesting ways of killing enemies. After the 4th or 5th time of throwing them against a spiked wall, it becomes an unrewarding chore. What makes this more disappointing is how it blatantly rips off Dead Space's Kinesis module telekinesis, also known as GRIP, G-R-I-P. It's very difficult for games to create truly original ideas. Once a game becomes successful, the germ of the idea is watered down and looking to emulate a predecessor's success. But to blatantly rip off an existing weapon and do it worse with a considerably bigger budget is poor. The game's structure feels reminiscent of a PS3, Xbox 360 game. Its linear design doesn't allow the player to engage with the setting and story in a meaningful way. The trope of being close to an objective and then suddenly falling down a chute, an explosion that blocks your path, can be mind-numbingly frustrating. The Callisto Protocol forces these breaks without sophisticated means of subverting audience expectations. These segments play into a style of storytelling that feels dated. For a game that prides itself on its lore and expansive world building, the player isn't allowed to ascertain meaning to its world. Though the game conveys a story through photorealistic cutscenes, playing the audio dialogues as you're walking the prison would have benefited the overall bleakness of a foreboding prison. The lack of fear is felt through not being given the option to care or freedom to find your footing by venturing into secret rooms as such. Later on in this story, you learn of Danny's dissonance for you and why she boarded your ship at the start of the game. Jacob learns of Danny surviving the outbreak, and you come to find you have the direct involvement in not only the outbreak, but also the death of her sister. Danny's motivations and lack of care towards Jacob are justified, but what becomes apparent is Jacob's desire for redemption. Besides the general motivation of wanting to live, we aren't aware of his background, besides being a rogue, which would imply a lack of family. Danny's purpose to live is equally dire, but an innate desire to solve the outbreak in honour of her sister's death can be plausible. The game's tension is stunted by a lack of coherency through all the departments of this game working in tandem. The score is serviceable but could be applied to several TV, film or gaming projects as it's not unique. The attempted jump scares fall flat through the tension not being created from not only the music but the general gameplay and how the game's been put together. An example of this would be in the laboratories. The music softens and the smoke arises from the vents. Why it didn't work is because one of the enemy's arms was poking out, which killed any fear or anticipation of what could have been scary. The driving finale of this game is largely forgettable. The Callisto Protocol tries upping the ante by blighting out endless rehashes of bosses, instead of utilising Sam Witwer's maniacal character. As Danny is put into a position where Jacob could leave her behind, he subverts expectations and deviates from his original plan. In saving Danny, the pair flee for an escape in another trope-infested scene, for Josh Duhamel's great acting and Karen Fukuhara's reciprocating of all his emotions. This monumental scene and the emotional gravitas of these final moments is squashed when the game retcons its own ending, all for the cheap ploy of promoting a further story and last attempt at a jump scare.
But I'm going to need your help.
The Callisto Protocol toes the lines between homage and copying in many elements. Though it can execute its own mission, for its visually rich setting and striking gore and character models, it falls short of a horror thriller. An apparent issue with this game is how painfully it relies on regurgitating existing ideas we've seen done better in other games. The elephant in the room being Dead Space, a game that was rushed to launch just to avoid the inevitable comparisons of the Dead Space remake that came a few months after. This game was stunted by its own driving force in Glenn Schofield, resting on its laurels of what made masterpieces in gaming generations ago. The honourable sacrifice at the end, slandered with a blatant DLC bait, leaves more to be desired, which sums up why this game missed the mark.
It's a prison moon, Max. They take their security pretty serious.
Thank you for letting me obsess again.